And yep, we are currently live on Facebook. So, hi, Mary Beth. How are you today?
Hi, good to see you.
Very good to see you. And thank you very much for your time in joining me today as a very, very special guest. Before I begin the live talks with Traei for Her Stories Untold, I want to acknowledge the land that on which I live in and work on is the traditional and unceded territory of the Coquitlam Nation and lies within the shared traditional territories of the Tle, Batu, Katsiet, Musqueam, Squamish, KK, and Stole First Nations. So thank you very much. And yeah, where are you located, Mary?
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area.
San Francisco Bay Area. Okay. Well, I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And may I ask how's the situation with COVID-19 over there in San Francisco?
Well, in the US, the San Francisco has basically done the best of any major metropolitan area. We have the best, lowest infection rate, basically the highest vaccination rate for an area as a whole, but we are having somewhat of an uptick. And so it is concerning. And there's some rules have been re-implemented, like the masks and that kind of thing. But the area as a whole has generally been pretty COVID conservative.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I think here in British Columbia, we kind of went through different segments and phases, and we are based on the news that I've been reading is we're in our fourth wave, so to speak, kind of thing. Yeah, vaccinations are almost there, but not quite there yet. So yeah, it's similar to what the globe is currently experiencing at the same time. So my take on it is just I really loved what you said before, protect yourself so that you can protect your neighbors. That's like the best thing ever. Just doing the best. So yeah, so thank you for that. Um, yeah, so I am I've been really looking forward to our talk today. I'm very excited because you have extremely amazing, empowering journey and story to tell us today. And I guess I'm just gonna let you tell us, start off by telling us who you are today. Share from that point.
Sure. So today I have 27 years clean and sober from what was primarily an extensive methamphetamine addiction. And I'm a board member for two peer-to-peer recovery support organizations, LifeRing Secular Recovery and She Recovers Foundation. And I also do a lot of speaking, like today, about my experience, LifeRing, She Recovers, and also about multiple paths to recovery, because that's always one of my emphases. It's just making sure that everyone is aware that there are many options for them to choose from and that they can find the option that's going to be the best fit for them, or even mix and match, which is what I did and which is okay too. I do writing as well. I actually had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last year called I Beat Addiction Without God. I was a keynote speaker for the Women for Sobriety Foundation this year. So I do a lot of that. And also I am, as people are usually interested, I am a retired federal administrative law judge. Yes.
Yeah. That's that part is like where I'm like almost kind of like blown away, shocked, and find it so inspiring, even though that's not my field of work. But I kind of just want to backtrack a little bit. You mentioned that you were at the Wall Street Journal op-ed of, I Beat Addictions Without God. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a short version of what I'll talk about today, which was my story about having, succumbed to a substance use disorder really as a child. I mean, I started using it at 12 and I was a full-bore addict by 17. And then I talk about how when I went into recovery, I was told that I had to do it the 12-step way, which is a faith-based approach. And I am an atheist and I knew I couldn't do it that way. And so I had to find another path, a path that worked for me. And so that was the sort of the scope of the op-ed. And that's sort of the short version of what I talk about in many of my speaking engagements.
Okay. No, and thank you for sharing, because that's I would say it's a different pathway journey, like the traditional pathway versus what you experience. And I think that's very important to note, because not everybody's path and experience is ever going to be the same. You might be attending one program or that program, but it's just not going to be the same experience.
Right, and there's no one program that works for everyone. I mean, the programs I participated in certainly wouldn't claim to be, the one and only option or one size fits all. People are different, and what works for one person may not be the best fit for someone else. And sometimes in recovery, also what works for you in the beginning may
Yeah.
not be the best fit, a year or 2 or 3 years down the road. You may want something else to sort of supplement or just a new way of looking at it. So there's definitely not a one size fits all in recovery. There are options, and it's important that people have an opportunity to be aware of their options so they can find the one that's going to be the best fit. My goal is always, how can I increase the likelihood that you will succeed? What can I do? What can I say? What can I make you aware of that will increase your odds of success?
And I think that's really important because I think as a woman, we tend to go a certain path because that's what's been told to us and what's been shown to us. And then we tend to, I would almost say like you feel pressure to stick to that path, right? And when it's not working out for you, you might be stuck, or almost kind of trapped in that space because you think that's the only way. But I love how your journey is about you're almost kind of breaking the form, right? But finding it and then like turning out amazing, right? Kind of thing as an outcome of that. And I think that's where there's a lot of pockets where strength can come from. You build a lot of resiliency, right? So I guess please tell us about your journey from the beginning, your childhood.
Yeah, so my short version is always childhood abuse leads to childhood addiction, right? That's not an uncommon path, especially when someone starts using in their teenage years. And so I did grow up in an abusive households, multiple different types of abuse. I also had two pretty bad rapes, one when I was 17, one when I was 19, and that certainly exacerbated the situation. So I started drinking, which was my entry drug when I was 12. I moved on to pot and then pills. Acid was big in my South Jersey town in the mid 70s, and I did that. But when I was 16, I found meth, and that became my drug of choice. And by the time I was 17, I was an IV meth user. So on high school graduation day, I had, bruises and track marks. My hand was actually curled because I had hit a nerve when I was shooting speed in my hand that day. Just full bore addiction by high school graduation.
So I'm very sorry to hear, the experiences that you went through, and thank you very much for, opening that vulnerability and sharing it with us. And I think at the time where the pain was very intense because of multiple events and traumas that took place, I think one seeks something to, would you say it's like numbing the pain? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple reasons, but it's definitely a pain number. It also is it's in the beginning. I mean, not when you're in the midst of your, addiction when it gets bad, but in the beginning, it actually is fun. There is a certain happiness in it, a happiness that I really hadn't felt in my regular life. I didn't really have that kind of joy as the first time I started speed. But of course, the fun part doesn't last for those of us that succumb to a substance use disorder. That's only in the very beginning. It just doesn't last. And so, yes, but it wasn't numbing. It was also really a distraction because it took sort of up a lot of my brain, right, to think about, when can I use next, or who can I get it from, or, how often can I do it? How can I hide it from my parents to the extent they were even paying attention, which wasn't a lot. So there's, and also you're sort of bonding with your druggie friends, right? I mean, it's a shared experience. It's sort of a secret. There's you spend hours talking, having philosophical discussions. And so there's a lot of reasons that sort of reinforce each other that can lead to people succumbing to a substance use disorder.
I see. And what I'm hearing is that it's in essence, it's kind of, there is a network of support in that realm, right? Kind of because of people that are doing the same things, or maybe different experience and whatnot, kind of thing. What I wanted to ask is that was there another group or other support, maybe like a figure, somebody that was reaching out to you at the time, or a different group, or?
I mean, I definitely had a different group in that I was always in the high academic group. I went to a relatively small school system. And so there were about, I say, a dozen of us that sort of were kept together because we were in all the advanced classes. And so I definitely had sort of this one group that I was with for most of the day, you know, especially in high school, and then a completely different group that I was with in my off hours when I was out, you know, drugging around. So it was sort of a split, you know, a split personality in that way. But yeah, I mean, I did have positive, you know, people that were around me, but I also I didn't know how to express my pain. I didn't really tell anyone what was going on at home. Even friends that lived like several houses away, when I told them as an adult, they knew there were problems, but they didn't realize how bad it was. And so, you know, a lot of us, when we're living in an abusive environment, we hide that. And so even before putting drugs in our system, we're not really sharing our whole self or really getting the emotional support we need because we don't know how, or we've been either directly or indirectly told that we're not supposed to talk about these things outside of the family. So there's all of that going on as well.
And you're absolutely right. And it's not just, you know, the experience with drug use or alcohol. I feel, I mean, it is a known fact. It's not a secret that, you know, like, for example, domestic violence for women at home, you know, especially with this pandemic ongoing, they're 24/7 at home, right, with their abuser. And there's really nowhere to go or hide and to communicate those abuses, and whether it's physical or you know, emotionally, right? And some people seem to discredit or dismiss, you know, emotional traumas. They're just as big, because that's what's inside carrying our physical, you know, outside exterior, right? So I feel like, yeah, you're absolutely right. We tend to, you know, you're not supposed to air out your dirty laundry. You shouldn't be telling people of your trauma or your pains, and you should just, in fact, try to hide it. And, you know, as somebody else, a third person watching that person, or knowing or detecting that there are issues going on, I guess what we've been almost socially conditioned and trained to do is like, you know, at the most, oh, are you okay? Oh yeah, I'm fine, right? And you kind of just stop there because you don't want to probe or go too deep, because it's a very vulnerable and sensitive area. And sometimes, and I think you're right, because when a person is, you know, going through stuff, going through issues, challenges, trauma, or abuse, that person isn't at 100% capacity to say, hey, you know what? I need help. Please help me, right? They may show you subtle signs, but oftentimes, especially so, I think in this modern day, because social media, a lot of things get washed out. We become less sensitive to, you know, being, you know, intuitive, or, you know, really feeling it, and then reaching out to people. But yeah, I recognize and see, you know, what you said is so very true. Yeah. My next thing is, you mentioned, I guess, this whole process of what you experienced in your younger years. There's a lot of destruction. Did you want to talk more about that, and alongside the development of the new traumas that took shape?
You mean, how did the traumas impact me, or?
Yeah, like, yeah. How was it, like, you know, you mentioned that you got into these groups, right? And then at the very beginning, there was like a phase of, you know, it was fun because you had that support that you never knew that you could have, right? And then you were moving into, I guess, destruction, some sort of form of destruction. And what made you realize that? Yeah.
I mean, so for me, I think I went through a lot of depression, you know, even before I started picking up substances. I have memories of when I was a child, and I had a lot of anxiety management techniques. Like when I was a little girl and I couldn't get to sleep because my mind was worrying or I was stressed out, I gave my fingers like they were different names. Like one was a cat that could talk, of course, a dog, you know, a teacher, a fireman, and I would have conversations. I'm like 4 or 5, and it was really sort of a calming technique that I developed. But I remember when I was about 9 or 10 and my brother was born and he was a baby, and I used to have a hairbrush set, like a comb and a brush and a mirror. And in those days, Marsha Brady, you're supposed to brush your hair 100 times before you went to bed. And I would do that, but I believed that if I didn't put my comb and my brush and my mirror down in the right order, that my brother was going to die or something bad was going to happen to him. So it was sort of a superstitious and sort of OCD type symptoms that I started to develop. So there was a lot of interplay with different ramifications of the abuse, and but yet I always did well in school, and so I think from the sort of the adult's perspective, it was hidden because I wasn't saying anything directly. I wasn't doing anything sort of overtly to bring attention. And for me, school was my positive, happy place, right? And so I enjoyed being in school. That was a place where I felt safe and where I got positive attention. And, you know, I had friends there. And so I wasn't really I didn't want to mess that environment up. I was just enjoying it during the day. But there were a lot of emotional, mental health impacts on me before I picked up the first substance that when I look back, I can really clearly see different tendencies of depression, anxiety, and even a tendency towards OCD, which luckily never fully developed.
And at the time while you're going through all those things, situations, you didn't, it's not one where like, oh, I have OCD,
No.
I'm experiencing depression, I have anxiety, right? It's absolutely not like that, right? And yeah, and sorry.
No, I didn't have the name. I just had the behavior, right? And
Yeah,
now I have the name. Yeah.
it's all the labels, right?
Yes.
So yeah, and that's usually it takes shape and form after the fact, right? Because that's when you become aware of those things, right? I think how did while you were balancing this day and night life at the time, how did you I mean it's not suddenly you woke up one day and said, hey, this is day and night and this is very destructive. What was that turning point?
Yeah, I mean, so when you go from like a drug user to a drug abuser to a drug addict, or as we would say today, someone with a substance use disorder, you don't know what day that happens, right? I mean, you slip into it. And so even now looking back, I say, well, at 16, I was probably could be categorized as a substance, having a substance use disorder, even though I hadn't, even before I picked up speed, because I was using drugs of some kind or another several times a week, and I was really pursuing them. But once I started using speed, it really quickly became more of a daily, or at least speed became my focus. And that is a really harsh, sort of nasty drug. And so there were a lot of ramifications that I hadn't experienced. Plus, I just started using more and more and more. And once you become an intravenous drug user, there's a physical, another sort of level of harsh physical impact. And so all of that just was sort of a gradual progression. It wasn't something that I really noticed, or when I did notice, I would just push it to the back of my mind. I wouldn't pay any attention. And that went on, so when I graduated high school, I actually went to college, and I did get some better control for the first 3.5 years of college. I didn't use meth very much. I used other things. I often used them to excess, but I didn't use them as much, as often. But then in January of my senior year, after having moved in with an abusive boyfriend, I started using meth again, and that just hit what I call round 2 of my meth addiction. And it was 10 years after college of just chaos and misery. I mean, it's always a little up and down. You start to maybe you do a little better for a while, and then you plunge further. But really, the graph longitudinally was this way. It was more like this. Small ups and downs, but the overall graph is a downward path. And so I went into rehab when I was 32. So at that point, I had been using drugs for 20 years, and I had been basically addicted to drugs for 16, with a little bit of lesser use during the first 3 years of college.
Wow. So basically you were doing it and up and down, going through it, you managed to finish college, and you were in your 10-year relationship with your ex-boyfriend at the time. And then you said fast forward, you finished school, college, and you went into rehab at age 32. But what was that turning point? Like, how did you say, hey, I'm gonna go to rehab now?
Yeah, so that ex-boyfriend, I actually did leave my senior year, but I was with the man who is now my husband. And so for me, there were a number of factors. One is that my body was actually breaking down. I was having a lot of physical impact from having used speed that long. And also remember, when you use meth, you don't sleep a lot. So there's also a physiological and a mental impact of the lack of sleep. So I was physically having problems. I was just emotionally debilitated. I mean, you know, I had just run out of steam. And also my partner then, my husband now, he was at the end of his rope. That wouldn't have been enough, but it was enough for me sort of as a last gasp trying to save the relationship to say, you know, what if I go to rehab? What if I go to rehab? Then you won't kick me out, you know? So that's how I ended up going in. Yeah, at 32 years old, I went inpatient.
That's amazing. There's that saying where behind every strong man, there's a strong woman. But in this situation, behind every strong woman, there's also a strong man. So kudos to your husband for that. No, okay. So so then you went in because you also wanted to make things better. You want to improve things, right? And
better. I mean, it's funny because I tell people when I went into rehab, I actually didn't plan to stop using. And it wasn't that I wanted to keep going. It was that I couldn't imagine that. Like that was beyond my imagination to stop. What I wanted was to figure out how to use less so that my life wouldn't be as destroyed. But again, that was just because stopping was beyond my comprehension. I just couldn't even, it just didn't seem like it was even on the table. But I was serious about going in and trying to find a way to improve, you know, trying to find a way forward. I was serious about that.
So in essence, almost you went to rehab with the intention that I'm going to go to rehab to find a way to better manage these habits.
Yeah, and hopefully to use less. I mean, I knew I would have to use less, that I couldn't keep on doing what I was doing because it was going to turn out the same way.
Right.
But when I went in, you know, I looked for what I thought was medical treatment. You know, I mean, to my mind, I was going into a medical treatment facility and I was going to be treated for my addiction, as we said in those days. But on the first day in my rehab, I went to a class. It was like every day they studied a step from the 12 steps. We would read from the book about the step and then we would talk about it. And on my first day there, they were reading from step 3, which is made a decision to turn my will and my life over to a higher power. And I literally, you know, I'm a good student. I raised my hand, you know, hey, you know, I'm an atheist. What about me? And they told me that I had to accept a higher power. There was no other way. I had to agree I was powerless. I had to accept a higher power, or I wasn't going to be able to stay clean. And I looked at her and I said, I've been here one day. And you just told me I'm going to fail. You know, it seemed crazy to me. It was a very surprising situation to find myself in.
So you went there and they kind of told you that you have this one path to recovery and you need to conform, you need to convert yourself to that. And and that's more, is it like more religious, like aspect of the higher power, or is it just any higher power?
It can be any higher power, but it has to be higher other than you, and you have to turn your will and your life over. So my concern wasn't just about the higher power, which was impossible. I mean, they did say it didn't have to be God. It could be any type of higher power, but it was also that powerlessness idea, which is part of that program, I wasn't comfortable with. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, most of the women that were there with me, that was a program that they felt an affinity for, you know, and so it wasn't that I didn't want them to know about it. It was the message that was the one and only way that was problematic. And it turns out even then it wasn't true.
It was almost conflicting, right? Because I'm just giving you this one platform and that's it.
And that's it. I mean, I was told I was fighting the program. I was told I was running on self-will. You know, I was told my best thinking had gotten me there, to which I would reply, you know, I promise it wasn't my best thinking. All of this to try to get me to buckle down and conform. And to me, that was a particularly dangerous message because they were telling me if I really couldn't do that, if I really couldn't believe in a higher power, which I couldn't, but they were telling me that there was no option for me, right? That I was not going to be able to stay clean and sober, that they were saying that there was no path forward for me. And that was a dangerous message. What if I would have believed them? Where would that have left me? But luckily, I didn't think that could be right. It seemed to me impossible that no atheist in the history of time had ever gotten sober. Like, that just didn't seem possible. But it was a really difficult position to be put in so early in recovery, right? Really difficult position to be put in.
It must be. I mean, I can only imagine. How long were you in rehab for, like the whole duration?
I was there for a long time. I went inpatient I ended up staying for 5 months. It was originally a 90-day commitment because I was really on the high end of the substance use disorder spectrum, right? Now they talk about it as a spectrum, and I would have been on the really high end. As we said in my day, I was tore up from the floor up. I mean, I was really in bad shape, and I had been using for a very long time. And so I did stay in, even though a lot of what they were telling me wasn't a good fit, I did stay in because I knew I needed help. And this was the only help that I had found. And so I stayed, and I did my best to keep my ears and my mind open, to listen for the ideas that I thought could be helpful, and to just ignore everything else. And that's what I did. I went to the classes, I did all the readings, I participated. They had classes even for us about our abuse histories, as well as recovery from substance use disorder. Yeah, I did my best to grab everything that they were offering that I thought could help me. And then I just decided I'm going to ignore the other parts. And that's what I did.
Wow. That's yeah, it sounds like a very, very intensive experience, and very dedicated too, because you had a goal too, right? That's why it was clear in your head that you need to finish this, regardless of what you were experiencing and how challenging it was. And regardless of whether it's the 90 days, you knew that to finish this, to get to the stage that you need to be at, you had to be there for about like 5 months, right? So now, after rehab, how did you end up finding, like, She Recovers, LifeRing, like, if you want to share?
So this is 1994 when I got out, January of 94, and it was before the internet. So I actually went to the library to do research on options. And what I found the first was Women for Sobriety, which still exists. As I said, I was just a keynote speaker there. And Women for Sobriety is about self-empowerment. So when you go to a Women for Sobriety meeting, you don't say, I'm Mary Beth and I'm an addict. When you introduce yourself, you say, I'm Mary Beth and I'm a competent woman. It's a program based around those self-empowerment ideas. One of their messages is called a statement, is I had a life-threatening disease that once had me. In other words, you're finding your way to control that disease. So that was a much better fit for me. And I started attending the Women for Sobriety meetings. And then I also found Rational Recovery. They're now SMART. Also a secular approach. They believe that your self-will basically is sufficient to overcome your substance use disorder. And then I also found SOS, which is the parent of LifeRing. And LifeRing is about the 3 S's: sobriety, secularity, meaning no faith, no religion in the meetings. Although many members have personal religious or spiritual beliefs, and that's fine. It's just our recovery program isn't around that. And also it's a self-empowerment program as well. And so I found the others at about 6 months, and I started attending meetings, and I never followed any one of those programs either. I mean, by then I did have 6 or 8 months by the time I went to the meeting. I just kept pulling ideas that I thought would be helpful to me and pulling them from everywhere. I pulled them from all those programs. I pulled them from NA, I pulled them from rehab, and I just built what LifeRing calls a personal recovery program. I just built one that I thought would work for me.
And I think that's very amazing, because that's the beauty of it. Sometimes, although this platform is provided to one in one way, right? And this organization says, you have to do it this way. I think what's important is what you touched on earlier, like having a strong core, a strong foundation, because then that you can create that willpower to do anything, right? To focus on anything. And then knowing that you can be flexible, like it doesn't have to be that one form. And that's why I tell people sometimes, come take a look at this, or look at this, hear this out, read about this. And they may say, oh, but I'm not interested in that, or that's not my area of thing. But I was like, no, because you don't know what you'll learn, right? And the beauty of it is that you can take away what you need. You don't have to necessarily agree. Everything doesn't have to relate to you, but you can go into it. I would say sometimes it's difficult to get there, but like a mind of a sponge, you soak up what you need, and those needs may change and evolve over time. But certainly at that moment when you're in that position, you're going to be taking in what you need to keep going forward, right? So
that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, I even pulled out ideas out of 12 steps. It wasn't not the higher power or powerlessness, but I pulled ideas out of it. They had a mantra called one day at a time. And I found that helpful in the beginning, to help with cravings, when I was fighting urges, to just say, okay, I'm just not going to use today. I'm not deciding about tomorrow, just today. I found that to be a useful idea. And there were other ideas that I pulled from talking to 12-step members, different techniques that they had used. So you're right. It's important to keep your mind open and pull what you can, although it's best if you're told this is one of the options and there are others, so that you don't feel like you're trying to beat, that square peg into that round hole. Right. And the other thought I have is you sort of alluded to the fact that that one type of recovery sort of strengthens you for other recoveries. And that definitely happened with me. When I had my recovery from substance use disorder more solid, and when I had sort of taken control, right, and made decisions for myself, where do I think I need to go? What are my priorities? How am I going to get there? Making choices. I was able to apply that same approach to recovering from the trauma and the abuse, and what job should I get next decision, and all the decisions in my life. It was sort of building up my competency and my sense of confidence that wasn't just relevant to my addiction recovery, but it was relevant to life in general. And so that was really helpful.
And I think that's very true, because the way I see it, almost it's a form of meditation, like just for today, right? And that's something you can even apply to the pandemic situation. I know a lot of people are struggling behind closed doors, but they don't talk about it, right? And then we try to continue, but it is a difficult time. And I'm gonna admit it's a difficult time for myself, everybody, and it's okay. And that just for today, just getting grounded with yourself, reconnecting, I think it's very important to build that up. And you mentioned that while you're building that up, you got to a space where you felt more confident. You were looking forward to things like, this is the type of career that I could have, that type of jobs, or these are places I can go, people that I can see, right? So in a sense, I was it like very liberating to arrive to that stage?
I mean, it was definitely difficult in early recovery, when I had a Berkeley degree and my last job was as a word processor, and I could only hold that for 9 months because of my addiction, right? So I had a Berkeley degree with actually good grades and a very choppy work history. And so that was painful to realize what my path could have been. But instead, in early recovery, my last job was word processing. So that was a challenge. But as I got sober, I had to be realistic. So my first job in recovery was a part-time, low-level administrative job, because that's all I could handle. For me to get up every day and get a shower and get to work on time and stay the whole time I was supposed to be there, not go out to lunch and not come back, or not call in sick, and do a good job, and do that day after day. That was new behavior. I was 32 years old. I had never done that in my whole life, so I had to not even build for the first time my professional competency. And then I moved into a full-time job as an office manager, a higher level administrative job. And then I moved into a larger company, and I got an entry job there, and then a promotion. My last job before law school was as the customer service manager for a semiconductor test equipment company. So it was that step by step rebuilding myself professionally, each step forward.
And I'm curious, like, as you moved up with more responsibility as a woman, career woman, did you find that when you had more responsibility, it was actually helping you with your recovery, like your whole how you were dealing with it? Like, was it like helping you almost move away, better, more wholesome away from that trauma, that recovery process that you were still going through? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the first thought that comes to mind is that in recovery, my biggest sort of post-substance use disorder challenges were around the trauma, and that included PTSD and anxiety, right? So I was actually surprised to find once I got sober that I actually was really anxious. It took me a while to even see it, because to me, it was just all normal. I was just, high-strung Mary Beth. But gaining confidence professionally in my substance use disorder, and I did start addressing my trauma history especially once I had about 2 years sober. I was able to focus more on dealing with my trauma history. All of that was really interconnected in making me feel stronger and more capable and more confident. I mean, even small things like, I came into recovery in debt, and gradually, paying my credit cards off, starting with the highest interest card and working my way down, just seeing the debt go away and starting to save. That just, you start to feel more like a part of the world, more like you have a healthy life that has, and that I hadn't maxed out on my potential yet. I was worried that getting sober at 32 meant that I would never be able to get where I would have been in any area of life, but especially professionally, because I had lost, basically I lost 10 years after college. But at least I believed I could be moving forward for a while, that there was still room for growth professionally, and there was definitely room for emotional growth for a very, very long time. And even now I say emotionally, I'm mostly recovered. Okay. So I still have a little bit of that anxiety twinges and things, but you're right. It's all interconnected. It reinforces each other. Success in one area reinforces your confidence to attack another area.
Yeah. And I think that's very true, because for women, like sometimes, like, in this pandemic, I've been talking to a lot of other women, right? Like, because you're always at home, people are like, oh, you know what? I don't even brush my hair. I don't put on makeup. And I'm not saying makeup or hair defines a woman. It shouldn't be, okay? But at the same time, it is things that you look forward to, you enjoy, right? And you feel confident, right? So some of the things I've told is like, sometimes even if you have nothing going on that day, you just get up, do your hair, do your makeup, put on your lipstick, put on your mascara. And this is nothing to do with being shallow. You just that little action of steps of doing something is putting you in motion of, waking up, feeling more positive, right? Now you're like, oh, okay, well, I did all this. Maybe I should go get a cup of coffee, or like, yeah, or like I'm gonna go read a book, or I'm gonna call my friends and, FaceTime or something like that, that type of thing. So it's whatever little steps that you take, it's all building to the bigger inner core foundation. And when you get to a stage, you might not even realize those little steps are helping. I think, yeah, then you start to really progress, and you can expand and open the doors to other possibilities, right?
That's right. I mean, some women wore makeup because they had to, and others, and I, like us, I think I enjoyed. I started wearing makeup early, and I have lately in the pandemic. Later in the pandemic, started like, well, wait, I want to wear my real clothes sometimes, not just my like stay-at-home yoga pants, But yeah, it is a step-by-step process, and LifeRing talks about that really recovery is about choices, that when you're faced with a choice, and this isn't just about substance use disorder, but really about any area that we're struggling, you can either make the choice that's going to sort of reinforce the struggle, reinforce the addictive tendencies in whatever area of your life, reinforce chaos, reinforce misery, or you can pick the positive choice. And life in the long run, happiness in the long run, is about making as many of those positive choices, both on big decisions and small decisions, as we can. That's really what happiness is. And it's also that when you make the choice, positive choices repeatedly, it becomes a habit. Right. And so now you don't have to think about that choice anymore. Your new habit is positive, and you can go work on something else, some other area of your life. And so it is that reinforcing. And I did also want to mention She Recovers. You had asked me about She Recovers Foundation, and they aren't actually limited to substance use disorder. They're also for women in recovery from trauma, from mental health, gambling, grief, any area that someone is struggling with is an appropriate area to talk about in She Recovers, because usually these areas overlap. I don't know someone with an addiction who didn't also have some other trauma or mental health struggle. And even women without substance use disorders, and about 25% of She Recovers don't have a substance use disorder, but they often have multiple different types of struggles as well. And so it's a nice place if someone's looking for a sort of one spot where you can talk about all those areas of your life. She Recovers can be a really good fit for women.
No, that's amazing, because you're right, because oftentimes people think, you go to a group for support, right? It has to be something more very intense, it could be, because you're alcoholic or you're doing drugs, right? And if you're getting abuse at home, you're not going to go to a group, right? Because you got to hide that, right? You're spending a lot of energy and time hiding that. And I think it's important to know, because all those other realms are just equally as important, and you need to have a network of support. And I find that amazing that they're able to provide that support for a woman in all walks of life in different situations. And truth be told, I think as a man and woman in this globe, everybody is going through something. And depending on what culture and what social conditioning, what sort of environment, community or no community support that you have or live in, everybody is unfolding and dealing with things very differently. I wanted to mention that, I remember I was watching Ariana Huffington, like Huffington Post. She said something that I found very inspiring. She says that, a lot of times in life we tend to ignore. Like if I'm feeling really angry about something or really sad, one's natural reaction is to ignore or suppress it. But she says, actually acknowledge it, greet it like a child, don't just dismiss it. Really feel it. And then afterwards you can decide how you pick up yourself and, how you deal with it. Because if you don't deal with it, like a child crying in the background, like you need to deal with that, right? It's just gonna be there ongoing. The issue is gonna still exist. It might even worsen because you haven't taken the time to address it. And I thought that was like a very simple thing, as an example of a comparison. And I thought that everybody can take something away from that, right? To deal with their life situations.
Yeah, I mean, one of the sobriety techniques is when you have the craving feeling, right, or thought, is to just recognize it and say, oh, I'm having that craving feeling. I'm feeling like I want to recognize it sort of from a distance. Don't shove it away, but it helps you actually not get sucked into it, because you're not trying to control it. You just say, oh, that's the feeling I'm having, or you have anxiety. Oh, wow, I'm really overreacting and feeling anxious over this. That's interesting. It's also a learning tool, right? Because emotions are there for a purpose, for a reason, and they can teach us about ourselves. Why am I having anxiety from this situation? Is it truly threatening to me, or was I feeling tired or stressed about something, or does this remind me of a different situation where actually something bad did happen? And so all of that, you're right, to feel the feeling, and sort of try to think about it to feel it, but not let it pull you under, but rather try to think about is there something that I can learn from this? Is there something that this can teach me in this moment?
I think it's kind of like becoming aware.
Yes.
Like, oh, this is anxiety. Oh, this is a craving. So now you know what to do with it, right? If you aren't aware of these, little trigger moments, right, of change, that's when you get sucked into, just doing it, or, just, binge, right? You might go on a binge or something like that, right? But once you become in tune and tap into those moments and say, oh, wait, I'm feeling that, and I know this feeling, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to switch, right? So, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So, you mentioned, so you were working your way, just coming back, working your way back professionally, regaining confidence and strength. Like, what I really want to ask you is, what made you study law and not other subjects?
So when I when I was working at that semiconductor test equipment company, at that point I had about 5 years sober, and so I'm about 37 years old. I really looked forward, and I actually didn't want my boss's job or my boss's job. And so let me just tell you, ladies, if you don't want your boss's job, then you're probably not in the right place, unless there's somewhere else you can go in the company. And it really made me sit back and think, where did I want to go? Now that I had 5 years sober, I was in a good place. What were my long-term professional goals? And I had, been interested in being an attorney since I was younger. I had thought about it as one career option. And I remember my mother, who liked to fantasize about winning the lottery. One time she said to me, well, what if you won $1 million? What would you do with it? And I said, well, I think I might go to law school. And then I looked at my husband and I said, I don't need $1 million to go to law school. Maybe I ought to look into that now, And so I did. I looked at applying to law school, and I had 6.5 years. I started law school when I had 6.5 years sober, and I was 39 years old when I started law school. So it was sort of a midlife, I like to say early midlife, but it was a midlife career change for me. I felt like I either needed to, if I was going to get back to school, I felt like it was time. Either I was going to do it, or just admit I'm not going to do it and develop another path. But law school attracted me in part because I knew that a law degree could be really versatile. There were a lot of different things you can do with a law degree. And there were also some really good law schools near me. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I ended up graduating from Berkeley's law school, which is a top 10 law school. So I had access, to really good law schools. So that it was all of those factors, but I had an idea of what kind of law I wanted to do, but I also knew as a backup that a law degree could get me in the door for a lot of different type of jobs.
So how many years were you in law school for?
Law school in the US is 3 years. So you have your undergraduate degree, and then it's 3 years of law school.
3 years. Okay, so 6 years about there. And then you go into, after you graduate, is there like a period, or what happens?
Yeah, so you look for a job when you graduate. And my first job out of law school was at what we call in the US a big firm. So it's, like a law firm that has offices around the country and hundreds of lawyers. And so my first job out of law school, I lived in Silicon Valley, and so I was at a firm in Silicon Valley, and I did securities litigation and class action work, complex business litigation mostly. So that was my job out of law school. But that's a really demanding job hours wise. It's really like a 50 to 70 hour a week job, mostly a 60 to 70 hour week job every week. As I told my girlfriend, there's no light at the end of this tunnel. It doesn't get better when you make partner. It's forever. And so at some point I really looked at that job and thought, I felt proud that I had been able to accomplish that after having had, my history. I felt very proud that I had been able to do as well in law school as I did and land a job like that. But at some point it was really, how do I want to live the rest of my life? Do I want to live it like this? And I decided that I didn't. And so eventually I left, and I ended up working for the federal government as an attorney. And then later I became a judge.
If I may humbly say so, I feel very proud of you. Your journey, how you, yeah. So it's just so inspiring, so empowering, and I want to share too. Like when I was little, growing up, I was very interested in law, and I did think about law school, but because of the timing and stuff, I ended up studying anthropology, sociology, because I was very, very, very interested in the study of culture, society, both like quantitatively and also qualitatively, but more so qualitative, because I really like to find out, the experiences of people, how we connect, just different ethnicities, groups, culture, society. It was just very interesting to me. But what would you do if you were to pick? If you didn't do law, would have been your second choice?
Yeah, that's interesting. If I didn't go back to school, if I would have decided I don't want to go back to school, I would have probably done something else in management and tried to find, a different company that where I could have done something I would have preferred. That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I had thought about teaching because I could have got my teaching certificate in a year. My husband taught at the community college, and so that could put us on the same schedule as far as summers, and we could have spent more time. So I did, and I like being engaged with people. So teaching had an appeal. I was a history major in college, so there would have been a place for me. And so that would have been a different life, but I think it could have been, an equally satisfying life, just different than the one that I chose. That's what I would have done. I think I probably would have gone and got my teaching certificate and taught high school history or, political science or something along those lines.
Yeah, 100%. I think life is as fulfilling as one makes it, kind of thing. And when times are challenging or difficult, it isn't unfulfilling, but I like to call it's an opportunity to take a break. Yeah, to, reconfigure, reflect, and, redo things, or maybe even change directions in that perspective. For me, if I had to back to school now, I think I might go into law school because, now you're more like stable and calm, and that's an area of study that I might go into. The other field that I would have been interested in is dermatology. Yeah. So it's completely different fields, but it's always fun to kind of think about, what else would you do, right? Kind of thing. So
that's true. And I will say to the women your age, I went to law school, I was 39. Okay. So, and I had a 20-year career. I recently took early retirement, but even going then, I did, between law school and working as a lawyer was 20 years. So there's still, if you're in your 20s or your early 30s, there's plenty of time for you to really stand back and think, do I have the job that I want? Is there something else I would rather do? And go ahead and do whatever preparation you need to make that change. 39, I was in law school.
That's very inspiring. And it's funny because I remember there was a older lady in my class while I was in university, and she was like, I believe she was like 70 something. And she had like, she was a grandma, and she said, you know what? All my life, I just wanted to study, but I didn't have time. I got married early. I had children. I had to help my husband rear the children, finances and stuff. Everything was tight. And now my kids are growing up. My husband passed away, and I have time. So I went back to school. I finished, and she had the highest GPA. I was like, oh my God, I need your GPA, right? And then she's just like chuckling away, right? So she didn't stop. So life doesn't stop just because what age group you're in or what circumstances you're in. She was determined. She had tenacity. That's what she wanted to do. And yeah, and then she graduated. I think she finished her university studies, and she was obviously the oldest student in class, but that most happiest one. Ever. So I thought that was really amazing. I was like, wow. And, I'm very grateful to have met people like that along the way, just sharing their journey of the stories and different inspirations. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. After I was administrative law judge for the federal government, I took early retirement for a number of reasons, including some health issues, but it does allow me to now do a new career, which is to do my advocacy and writing on about recovery and multiple paths to recovery. So, I'm doing some writing. I've had pieces published. I do speaking. I'm on 2 boards. I just finished writing my book. So even now, it's nice to see that I still have room to grow, new things to learn. Part of the reason I started doing the writing of the book was because I didn't know how to write a book. It was an intellectual challenge. It was a brain stimulator to learn how to write a memoir. And so it's still, life is long, and there's many different phases. If you want to shift and make changes, you absolutely can do that. You can't always do it right this minute, right this day, depending on your circumstance, but usually there's a way forward if you think about it, develop a plan, and step by step move yourself in that direction.
I mean, I love memoirs. I love biographies because I love reading about other people's journeys and their stories because it takes time. It's not an overnight thing, and you have to be able to experience it all and come out of it, reflect, to be able to put it, ink on paper and to express, what has happened, right? And it takes, very importantly, courage, and it takes time to build courage, just like how you went through different segments of recovery and getting to where you are today, right? And, and I find that very beautiful because you're here now, and it's like, I always say, like, things happen and they're homework. So we did our homework, we're like looking for tools, our toolbox and shaping it, sharpening it. And then now you have the whole set of tools, right? And you did your homework, and that's where people are able to come out to express all of that. I did want to go back a little bit. How did you enjoy being an administrative judge? Like,
so I was a judge for Social Security Administration,
yeah,
which is part of the federal government in the United
right.
States, and it was a challenging job. I mean, certainly. You feel the weight of your decision because it has a real world impact on the people that are before me. When you're a lawyer, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of weight there too, because you have a client and you want to do your best for your client. You feel a responsibility, as you should, to make the best case and to make sure that you're working with them to the best of your ability. But as a judge, when people are, testifying in front of me, and I know that my decision is going to have a very real impact on their life, financial and otherwise. On the other hand, there are laws that I have to apply, and sometimes under those laws, I can't give them the answer that they would hope that I would be able to do it. And so it can be emotionally challenging sometimes, but it is really important to I just did my best to be as fair as I could and to apply the law, but in an objective way, and to balance out those factors, and also to know that the person in the hearing room, right, they're nervous. A lot of people that testified before me, that was the only time in their life they ever had to be before a judge. And so people are nervous, and you have to really be aware of that and try to guide them through to get them to talk about what you need from them in order to make your decision. So it's a complex and challenging job. But yeah, I'm glad that I did it for the time that I did.
Yeah, and it's definitely there's a lot of weight of responsibility, yes. Right? And yeah, I just I can't imagine, but I can imagine, and that responsibility that you have to carry, because every decision that you make is impactful to somebody's entire life, right? And how has that position, like overall, in combination of everything, build? You mentioned something about self-empowerment concept. Like, would you like to share a little bit about that?
I mean, the self-empowerment idea is basically that your success in general is based on your own motivation and your own efforts. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some people that they get more confidence by feeling a connection to a higher power, and I absolutely support that if that's, their worldview. Yeah. But even people that have that belief do usually have some sense of gaining their own confidence and confidence from their own efforts. I mean, whether it's their efforts in getting a good job, or their efforts in being a good parent, or being a good friend. I mean, really, our life is about our ability to sort of learn, to analyze where we are. And really, I think a lot of life is about priorities, right? And so for me, part of self-empowerment was really thinking about, what are my highest needs right now, or what area do I need to focus on? Because the reality is, and in early recovery, you learn this quick, you can't fix everything at once, right? We all have to make choices about where we're going to focus and what our priorities are at this point in our lives. And it's good if that's a conscious decision, if we really think about it, because then even if you can't do something right now that you want, if you know, okay, these are my priorities today, but in a year, I'll be able to start working on that. Or in 3 years, I'll be able to do that. And in the meantime, I can take these little steps to get there. It can make it can lead to a better outcome because you spend time doing the analysis on it. It can be so easy in our busy world to just get overwhelmed with our day-to-day tasks and our day-to-day activities. But it can be really helpful to do the analysis, to really try to find some space to think about what your goals are, what your priorities are, where you are, and what's the plan to get me from A to B to C.
Yeah. So it's a lot of in terms of planning, right? And just really writing it down and taking time for yourself to plan those things out. Now, I remember speaking to this amazing woman. She was sharing that, in the past, we might work and make details about a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, right? But she says, with the current reality, that doesn't seem to be very effective because 5 years is too far. 10 years is, I don't know what's going on with the world. Right? So she said something that I thought was very wise. It's doing like 1 to 2 year planning, and that's it. Of course, you have a concept of idea of what 5 years is going to be like for you, but with planning, I also want to caution here, like things sometimes life doesn't happen to what you plan, right? And just like last year this time, I didn't know I was going to be sitting here having the honor to speak with you as a special guest on Live Talks with Traei, her stories untold, right? So I feel like, yeah, a lot of things are out of planning, but I think it's very important though, like you said, to goal set, make a plan of, even if it's just like a short-term, goals, right? Because like I said earlier, as an example, getting up, getting dressed, brushing hair, that already sets the motion. You push the play button already, right, for yourself. So you're already rolling, right? So I think that's so important in regards to self-empowerment and the whole concept behind it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, no matter what plan we have, we need to be adjusting it on a regular basis, right? I mean, at least every 3 to 6 months, you really need to look at it again because things change. And sometimes we change our mind about what we want. And so, and that's okay. I mean, it's not written in stone. It's a goal. As you say, it's a goal. It's not mandate. It's not a mandate. It's a goal, but you're allowed to change your goals for any reason and there are many reasons that we do need to make adjustments. Absolutely.
I love how you said written in stone, because I'm always telling them it's not written in stone. It's not written in stone. Okay. Read it like it is, but it isn't. So switch. So, and you also mentioned 3 to 6 months, because I think that's very true, because I had friends, maybe they started a new job, right? And they're, I don't know, 3 weeks in, 1 month in, and they said, oh, I really miss my old job. I want to quit. I said, okay, well, it isn't my life, but try out for at the minimum 3 months, but at the maximum 6 months, because 6 months is like you're getting used to the whole process. You're finding your position, you're finding your place, and you're finding your voice, and you're also finding your network of support of colleagues and friends, and then make that final decision at 6 months, because that's when you're in a more comfortable stage, and you can make a better clear conscious decision in terms of what you really want, right? So just give up, I think, at 3 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, you might be missing out on something, because you might be really good at something, or or that might lead you to another path that was supposed to be waiting for you, but you're not gonna be able to discover that if you haven't crossed up to the 6 months point, right? So yeah,
I think that's good advice, because the truth is, I mean, it sounds like your friends are taking risks and stretching themselves. So we always have, the beginning is the hard part when you do that, because you're not comfortable with it yet. You're not skilled at it yet. You're nervous or maybe oversensitive to mistakes. And as you say, you're just not in the rhythm of it. So I think that's really good advice. I think you're giving good advice to your friends.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was hoping, because I felt like it's such a shame that you were building courage to make a job change during the pandemic, right? It takes a lot of courage. And certainly during the pandemic, a lot of people are craving change, because you're like lockdown, quarantine, you can't go anywhere. So you're constantly craving some form of change. And yeah, so I think just, fast forward up to speed, I think she's actually enjoying it. She's gotten used to it, right? She does miss her old work, but she's also enjoying the situation. So that's good, right? Whereas if she didn't take the time to walk this path, she wouldn't have been able to discover that aspect of things, right? So, and yeah. So there are certainly a lot of benefits to building this self-empowerment concept. And sometimes to find out what doesn't work is what leads you to what would work or what will work.
Exactly. I mean, it's analyzing successes as well as failures, right? I mean, if something's working, it's rarely 100%. Like your friend, the part of the job that she's missing, her old job, is there the part that she's missing, can she find a new path that will combine what she likes with her current job and what she's missing from her old job? And so it's both analyzing things even when they're working well is valuable, but definitely analyzing things when they didn't work out so well can really be a teaching moment Instead of just getting frustrated and, I'm just going to move on. It's really going to help us. It helps me in the long run to stand back and look at the picture and see exactly what it was that I didn't like, or where, often where could I have improved how I handled something, or how, the decisions that I was making, or maybe it just wasn't a good fit. I thought it was good, looked good, it sounded good. Sort of like when I went to law school. Just because I thought I wanted to do a certain kind of law, I knew until I actually did it, I couldn't be sure, right? It sounds good. It sounds like it'll be a good fit, but we never really know until we do it. And sometimes we find out it wasn't as good a fit as we thought, and that's okay. Just figure out why and move on to the next step.
Yeah, I think that's hugely important. You talked about, guiding yourself forward, right? I think this segues right into that, right? Because it gives you the platform and courage to say, hey, I've tried this, I've done this, and I'm going to go forward to the next steps, right?
Right. And the other thing I'll say about guiding yourself forward, that doesn't mean you have to live in an isolated bubble, right? Guiding yourself forward can include asking for advice from your friends, getting professional help if you need it. I mean, it's guiding yourself doesn't mean I have to ignore everything and I'm making all the decisions, but talking it out with people you trust is a form of self-empowerment.
Yep, that's very true. And yeah, and sometimes we have other people guiding us, right? And then maybe we were struggling and fighting that guidance a little bit at the very beginning. But once you realize that there's more good, more benefits from it, you kind of continue forward, right? Yeah. So it's yeah, so that's why I say, like, everything happens for a certain reason, and you take and what you make of it, and carry that with you. Take that tool, or don't take that tool. But if you take that tool, keep it, because you're going to use it later.
That's right.
Yeah. So so I wanted to touch on, about doubts, because, as humans, as women especially, we tend to have a lot of doubts. We're in constant anxiety, whether we realize it or not. And we're always very fearful of making mistakes. And I'm not faulting any woman, but I feel like our societal norms, gender roles, stereotypes have really placed us in that, box of sometimes fear of making mistakes and, hiding our anxiety. I don't know if you want to share some thoughts about doubts.
I mean, like I said, my biggest post-recovery challenge was really anxiety related to my PTSD. And it showed up in a lot of ways, but it did particularly show up in fears that any one mistake and my whole world was going to explode. Like I didn't trust the universe. I didn't trust that life would turn out well. And for example, if my boss would, God forbid, say to me, oh, can you stop by later? Immediately my mind would go to revisiting the past 48 hours. What did I do wrong? What horrible consequence am I going to go and get yelled at for? And usually it was nothing. It was like, hey, could you take on this project, or did you ask for this vacation on this day, or something silly? But my mind always went to the worst case scenario. It was a big struggle. I remember one morning, my husband's friends spent the night, and I woke up, and as I was getting ready for work, I was telling him all the things that were going to go wrong that day. This was going to happen, this bad. And he looks at me, he said, Mary Beth, it's good to have a plan. I thought, you are so right. I have already decided it's a bad day and I haven't left the house, Yeah. And so that was sort of an interesting, I'm sure he doesn't remember this conversation, but I have never forgotten it. I have never forgotten it, because it was my mind convincing me of these negative things, most of which were not true. And it took me a long time to be able to get that anxiety under, better and better control. But yeah, it was definitely a struggle for many years. It was a struggle.
Because of the weight of the fear that, any sort of mistakes can really destroy the whole entire progress, right?
Yes.
For me, like, I find it sometimes conflicting, because there's so many self-help books, talks and out there that says, oh, you should wake up and start with a really positive mindset and stuff. I mean, that's certainly helpful, but I also find that there is beauty in honing that skill where even if you woke up with terrible news, that shouldn't define and determine the entire day. Like your day doesn't have to be terrible because of that. You will be feeling a lot of anxiety and fear and definitely a lot of uncertainty, but don't let that define your day. And yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is that our fears don't actually have any connection to how successful we're going to be in overcoming the challenge or in how negative the situation is. Our fear is unrelated. It's usually about something else entirely. And so it doesn't actually help us address the issue. Even if I made a mistake, my fear is not helping me correct the mistake, and it's actually interfering with my ability to learn from my mistake, because all that anxiety and adrenaline from the anxiety is interfering with my ability to do the analysis, to figure out what went wrong, why did I make that error, what can I do next time, and all of that. You can get sucked into the anxiety to your detriment of actually resolving the problem.
Yeah, and this is very interesting because I remember years ago, this billionaire tycoon was talking about insurance. Digressing a little bit, but still related. It was very interesting because he says there's a lot of insurances out there. They sell you, in case of a plane crash, in case of this, but you get it after a certain amount of years, and this has to happen before that can take in, right? He said those are all fears and anxieties, but in reality, the chances are, like, if you weigh out the statistics, the frequency of when a plane crashes is minimal, right? So he says you need to spend the energy on doing what's in front of you. You have to kind of be realistic to that stuff. So he says for him, he doesn't actually buy a whole bunch of insurance. He'll buy car insurance because you have to have car insurance to drive it. And in fact, he has a car that he bought like that's like over like 15 years old. He says because it depreciates, right? But yeah, so he talks about, yeah, so don't get fed into that fear and anxiety and being trapped there, because we're buying sometimes we're buying idea. I'm not just talking about insurance anymore, just the thought of it. Like, we're buying insurance almost constantly because of the fear and anxiety of potential mistakes that would break it, anything. But in reality, like, we have to sometimes stop and apply that self-empowerment concept of benefits to help guide us to move forward and then start again. And it's okay to start again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's also, it's a lot of mental energy and emotional energy to be locked into the anxiety. I mean, yeah. It sucks up a lot of, it's sort of, you only have so much bandwidth to deal with life. And if you've already lost half of it because you're in this highly anxious state, you've only got 50% left of your brain space and your emotional space to deal with all the things you actually have to deal with. You've lost half to something that either hasn't happened or never will happen. Right?
Yeah, that's very true. So that's why I find that, everyone's still probably learning this. Like, it's okay to say no. Someone really amazing, outstanding once said to me, just say no. I say so many no's in an entire day. I was like, okay. So I've been saying a lot of no's, and then sometimes I'm like, wait, I wanted to say yes, actually, to that second piece of cake, but I said no because I was over applying the no to it. But in reality, it's okay to say no. No isn't being rude. You say it respectfully, of course, depending on which platform, but it's okay to say no, decline, because that's being truthful to yourself. Speaking your truth, right? So that's very important. Now, moving to being defeated, right? I feel like we're constantly in a cycle, right? We feel really confident, really positive, really energized. And then we go into a slump because we feel defeated for whatever reason. How do you go about that? Yeah.
I mean, I think the only time I ever felt truly defeated in my life was when I was in the depth of my addiction. I felt like there was no hope of ever coming out of it, and there was no way out. In my post-recovery life, I've certainly felt pessimistic. I felt vulnerable. I felt that things weren't going to go my way, but truly defeated, as in, really hard to even stand up. I haven't had that I can think of in my post-recovery life. And part of that is just, even though the anxiety interferes with it, what it's really about is learning to trust ourselves, that we don't have to know what's going to happen. Specifically, what we have to know is I, Mary Beth, can handle whatever happens. And that's sort of the mindset that I've tried to get myself around to. I don't have to know whether A, B, or C will happen. I just have to know that even if they do, I can handle it. But when people really get so defeated that they can't even stand up and start moving forward, I mean, to me, that sounds like it might be time for professional help to be able to get out of that slump. And sometimes self-empowerment means asking for the professional help that you need. I mean, I don't mean if that defeated sense lasts 5 minutes, but if it goes on and it's really preventing you from being able to pick yourself up and start moving forward, it's okay to ask for the help that you may need. That is self-empowerment. That is taking care of yourself.
Taking care and taking charge, right? Because
yes.
I find in society, regardless of different cultures, ethnicities and whatnot, there's a lot of taboo about seeking professional help. To say like, I need help, oh my God, something's wrong with you. I need to see a psychiatrist, oh my God, something's wrong with you. You need to go to an alcoholic, support group, like, okay, something's wrong with you, right? But I feel like, no, you shouldn't look at it as that. You should look at it as, wow, this person has a lot of courage and is coming out to say. And when that opportunity comes, I call it opportunity because that's your opportunity to help. If it's somebody that you're going to go out, take a step forward and make that connection and help the person. Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, one of the nice things about the internet is that people don't necessarily, if they're not ready to go to, say, a professional psychiatrist or a psychologist of some kind, I mean, you could go be in the She Recovers, support group, even listening to other people talk about challenges similar to yours can sometimes make you feel better because you realize you're not alone in it, right? You're not the first person that had these feelings or these experiences, and other women have found a way out and a way forward. And that's why part of the reason I speak, it's not just about the substance use disorder recovery, it's about the trauma recovery, the anxiety recovery, all those other areas that so many women have a similar history or some variant of my history, whether it's it wasn't a substance addiction, but it's a gambling addiction or an eating disorder or whatever. Part of the reason I like to talk is because to show that even with those challenges, it is possible to find your way out and to find your way forward over time, step by step, moving on to the next thing that you need to do. Because women do face, many women have abuse histories, many women struggle with anxiety or depression, many women have challenges in relationships, and it manifests in a lot of different behaviors that aren't positive and that harm the woman herself. And so anything that will be helpful is know the many options. Support groups are an option. Friends and family. Some people have religious advisors that can help them. Whatever's going to help you. And if you're not sure, just try a couple different ones and see which one feels like it's of the most value.
And I feel like building that courage to try out different ones, and as well as storytelling is a form of self-healing. I think that's very important. And sometimes when you're not telling the story, it's trapped inside. The healing can't really begin because you haven't acknowledged what is going on internally, right? And I think it's super important to understand multiple paths, whether they're the same or not, okay? Whether they're relevant or not, sit down and listen, understand, experience, and take turns to do that. Because as you mentioned, all of these are just as effective, in terms of that healing process, because then you're opening the doors to that network of support. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with sharing that story and journey, right? What's important? You mentioned something about what is important for the person when they're going through different situations, to be exposed to different options. Because,
I mean, for substance use disorder in particular, I'm concerned to make sure that the person with the addiction knows that they have choices. It's funny because I was presenting at a recovery center not long ago,
Yeah.
and they said to me, well, how do I know? I'm a mess. How do I know what's right for me? And my response was, if you hear about the options, you're going to be attracted to one or two of those options. So start there. It's the one that's, the ones that sound like they might be a good fit. There's that, but I also think a lot about the families and the friends. Like if your family member has an addiction and they say to you, I don't want to do AA, I want to go to LifeRing or Women for Sobriety, and you've never heard of it. That can sound like, well, they're not really serious, right? Because they're not doing the one option that I know about. And so part of the reason I like to increase awareness, that why I really want to increase awareness about the options, is not just for the individual, but for their friends and family to know that it's okay if they choose to pursue recovery a different way. But if they're choosing any of those options and they're serious about it, that's positive. Encourage them. Help. Yay! Good job. You're working on it. You're thinking about it. You're looking at your choices and you're trying out a couple of them. That's to be reinforced, not to try to push someone in one direction. And I say that not because I think the friends and family would do it because to be hurtful, but because that's all that they know. And so the more that they're aware there are other choices, the more comfortable the support group of the person in recovery can be that they're trying something out that's not 12 steps.
So I almost see it as like if I'm trying to help someone going through something, I can also tap into resources to do some research to better understand where they're coming from. I can never relate exactly the same, but I can find out ways of how I can approach it, because they might be resistant or they're unsure, right? At least I can reach out a little bit, better informed to be able to provide that help, right? And then so that the person that is going through those situations can choose the best pathway to take that next step, right? I can't be the one enforcing what is best, but at least I'm there, kind of thing. And sometimes that's kind of what they just need, just somebody there supporting it, just enough, to, not necessarily holding hands 24/7, but I think that's super, super important. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I was faced with a situation where I was told I had to do it a way that I knew wouldn't work, it was helpful to me that my husband, even though I wouldn't have let him tell me what to do, but because I was sort of bucking the system, it was useful for me to tell him, here's what I see the problem is, here's what I want to do. And for him, knowing me, he knows who I am, for him to say, that sounds like a good plan. It wasn't that it was his decision, but it was, since I didn't have anyone else around who had done it any other way, at least I could have him sort of give me a reality check on it. But the good news is today with the internet, options are easier to find. You can Google secular recovery or women's recovery programs, or whatever your specific interest may be, religious recovery programs, and you can find different choices. It's a lot easier today to get the information than it used to be.
Yeah, certainly there's so many different platforms and networks that are much more accessible, and we're just at a different time, and recovery is possible, whatever one is experiencing in life. And there's definitely lots of help out there, and I just think that I just think it's super wonderful to have this network that's not just focused in one area, because a lot of times I think, especially women, you can be very intimidated if it's just a label of an organization of one aspect, certainly. But of course, those organizations can focus better too, because it's one area. But it's nice to have a diverse area of support, rather than just one. And I think that's the beauty of the program. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and so that she recovers has all the areas. But I will say for people who are interested in 12 steps, 12 step AA and NA do offer women's meetings. They both do. And so if the 12 steps is a good fit for you, but you would like to be in a women's meeting, they have them. And LifeRing has women's meetings too. But Women for Sobriety and She Recovers Foundation are both organizations that are specifically tailored to women. And a lot of women find that to be the most comfortable place for them, especially because often women do have the trauma history, and sometimes they prefer to talk about that just with other women, and that can be a forum that is beneficial for that reason as well. But many options, many options for women and many options for men, and that's the good news about recovery. There's multiple paths, and you can find a place where you're going to be comfortable and where you're going to fit and where you're going to be able to get the help that you need.
That's amazing. And those female-centric programs you mentioned was She Recovers Foundation, Women for Sobriety, and their programs like LifeRing, they all have women meetings. And I think don't be afraid that it's just for women, because I think these networks, they're set up so that the intent is to help people, right? So sometimes you might go to one and they say, I can refer you to this other network of support, and from there you can be connected to an even bigger network, right? And I also want to talk about diversity, because woman today is not just the traditional role of a woman. I think it's I think these platforms, they're embracing all sorts of roles, right? Like they're very diverse, right, in terms of their support.
Yeah, I mean, when I say woman, for example, for She Recovers, it's born female, transgender, bi, it's LGBTQIA plus. Everyone is welcome. Someone who doesn't have is genderless, doesn't have a specific gender they identify with, but is comfortable in a female-centered environment is welcome. So it is broad in that way. And LifeRing as well has a similar definition of woman for their women's meetings, and I think most of them do. So yes, and then for diversity, I know, for example, She Recovers, they have a specific a women of color group, and She Recovers actually has a number of different subgroups that are of interest. There's one for health professionals, and during COVID, that has been particularly active because health professionals have faced a lot of challenges, and having that subgroup within She Recovers gives them a place where they can talk with each other, about the challenges they're facing. There's a legal professionals group. There's one for vets. There's a number of different subgroups in She Recovers for people who would just like to, discuss issues within that sort of smaller group of people with a similar experience or a similar background.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to have that connection, especially you mentioned the frontline workers, right? The health group, right? Because I've been hearing, stories where they might have been working in intensive care, right, as a doctor there, and they actually have not seen their husband or family for many, 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 many months, because they're there at full potential exposure, day and night, and they need to be quarantined from their families. So they're themselves are going through a huge amount of, I guess maybe they have their struggles too, right? Mental, because day and night they're seeing people dying in ICU, and I don't mean to leave in a negative tone, but this is kind of the reality of the situation, and loved ones departing without being able to see anybody else physically, and then themselves can't be physically together with their own family after the day ends of work for them, right? So yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and I always I appreciate and respect all gender roles, types, diversity. I think that's so beautiful, so important, and I find that it's really I don't know, like, just what a relief that the world is much more diverse and welcoming to that aspect. I don't tend to see people as just she or her or him, or they, or I recognize and respect the different types, but I also go back to the basics, the foundations, which is at the end of the day, we're just all human beings, coexisting in this globe together. And I go back to, it isn't just about COVID. or not, or mask or whatnot. You just have to protect yourself to protect other people. Do your best, and I think that's really important. And where we can come and connect and help, I think it's important to appreciate that, because it doesn't always happen, right? So I always think that we meet people at certain times because we're meant to meet each other after we did our homework, have our two kids, right? And we can have this conversation together, right? And because we have the same similar mindset to help people, right? And although all the stories that we have shared today isn't exactly a full depiction of somebody else's life, right? Nobody ever will be the same. Okay, that's impossible. But I feel like at the very best and minimum, everybody can take away something for themselves. Yeah. So I think we've kind of arrived to the end of our talk today, and I want to thank you very, very much for your time today, Mary Beth. It was so amazing. Like, pumped up, ready to go. Let's go. Law school.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. If anyone wants to get in touch with me about anything afterwards, you can reach me at marybeth@junkie2judge.com.
Okay.
Feel free to send me an email or look at the website. But I really appreciated so much, having a chance to talk to you both in our pre-discussion and our discussion today, and being able to reach out to your audience. Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Beth. And just before we go, I'm going to post your contact information as well as your website. And I'm going to add that to my resources at herstoryuntold.com. And as well, did you want to talk a little bit about your book?
Well, I just finished writing it, and it is the story of basically childhood abuse to childhood addiction, and it goes into the first 3 years of recovery, about how I built that personal recovery plan and started to work on the trauma. And so I just finished writing it, and I'm looking for an agent. So we'll see. We'll see. Okay. Hopefully someday you'll see it on a bookshelf somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure. We're going to be looking forward to reading it. So stay connected, and please share updates with us. And this is an amazing connection. And thank you very, very much for your time, Mary Beth, and stay safe and well. And maybe I'll be seeing you in person one day soon.
Good. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody that's joined us today. Take care. Bye for now.